Well, I guess you didn't expect to see that. Canadian icon here on a broadcast here from Texas. Well, we can't send up the drone today. As you can see, we've got a lot of rain coming down, so we're not going to even risk that. So we're going to take a look at a few webcams, assuming the stream holds up. And let's head into the maps and see what we got going on across the U.S. this evening. Well, the damage is just about over from that series of fronts that's come down through central and southern U.S. there. And the tail end of that front is running from about New Orleans out to the Gulf of Mexico. And we've got another frontal system coming southward through the Great Lakes. This one is actually pretty strong, and looks like there's a couple of others lined up. 1024 millibar high up there in central Canada. And let's just take a quick peek what's going on up in that region. And here's a look up there in Canada, and there is a lot of high pressure up in that region. But if you go out to the west, it's pretty stormy out there in Alaska. Now, I do have a couple of videos to show you. Now, one is a time sequence from a webcam right in this area in the Northwest Territories. So let me put that up. That's going to be just north of Yellowknife, and you see starting out, it looks kind of fair, but it's very cold there. Saw a little glimpse of a halo. Temperatures running about single digits Fahrenheit, and you can see a lot of high clouds kind of spreading over the area, a few waves embedded in that cloud layer. This is all altocumulus and altostratus up there. So it's fair weather, but it is kind of overcast in that region. But if we go a little bit further west, let's go out to Fairbanks, and you can see there's some weather going on in that area. Pretty powerful front. October is usually when they get the strongest systems coming inland, and you can see the warm temperatures in the Anchorage area. It's kind of surprising that it's warmer in Anchorage than it is in Austin, Texas. And up to the north, getting some snow and freezing rain. And I've got the Fairbanks camera. This is from this afternoon, and you can see a very extensive sheet of altostratus, and off in the distance there is a little bit of clearing, and that's because there is a bit of subsidence on the north side of the Alaska Range. And I think I may have a satellite image that I can show you, but this is heavily moderated by mountain waves. And there's a bit of isentropic lift going on in this cell, or in this system here, and it's dumping a little bit of rain across Fairbanks there. And just to take you out to another area, let's take a look up in the Arctic. There's a town up here called Johaven, and this is up north of the Arctic Circle. So if we take a look at that one, this is how it looked around midday, and you can see how low the sun is. It's only about 10 or 15 degrees there, and as we go on in 10-minute intervals, everything's got a very icy look. The clouds are moving. There's a lot of movement, and that's indicative of a lot of low cloud, and you can see that halo phenomenon due to the extensive ice crystals in the atmosphere there. And the sun was already down 30 minutes ago, and that's what you're seeing right there. So let's head into the maps and return to civilization. Okay, so the map in Texas showing that northerly flow across much of the state there. The cold front itself is out in the Gulf, and if we draw out the fronts, looks like it runs actually maybe a little further past that one station and then southward down to the Gulf. And there's some impressive signatures of that front on satellite that we'll be taking a look at shortly. Now, why all the rain? Let me outline the area of rain. There's one band right there in East Texas. There's another in Central Texas back to San Angelo, Ozona, Sonora, and north of San Antonio there. So this is being caused by very powerful isentropic lift. Got to keep in mind the front is down to the south. We've got northerly flow at the surface, but if you go up about 5,000, 8,000 feet in the atmosphere, there's actually a southeasterly flow. It's out of the east in some areas, and this is taking moist tropical air over the top of this cold dome. And if you go up even higher, up to 10,000 to 15,000 feet, it's out of the southwest. And that's bringing more tropical moisture up over that cold. Is that if you're at any level in the atmosphere, say 5,000, 10,000 feet, and you look at the winds, if those winds are coming from a warm area, let me draw a wind plot here. If it's coming from a warm area like you see here at Del Rio and flowing towards a cold area at the same level and below all the way down to the surface, you know, kind of take an average there. If that's happening, you can pretty much count on ascent. So that's certainly the case here. This is a good example of 10,000 foot winds, what we probably got going on there at Del Rio. And is that coming from warm air and pointing towards cold air? From the surface up to 10,000 feet? Yes. So there's definitely very strong ascent taking place there. So that's another way of kind of visualizing isentropic lift. You don't have to go to the isentropic charts necessarily, but you can see if the core ingredients are in place. So we'll look a little bit more at that shortly. So let's look at the tropical situation, or the lack thereof. Nothing expected in the next 48 hours. We'll look at the 5-day, and looking pretty quiet out there in the Atlantic. It's a bit of a different picture there in the East Pacific. We've got Tropical Depression Terra with 30-knot winds, and this thing off the coast of Nicaragua is expected to probably track just south of Acapulco and develop into a tropical system. And the GFS, I think, is picking up maybe on this system and tracking it up into Texas next week, bringing a lot of rain and precip. And if we have got that continued north flow coming in from the polar regions, then yeah, we can, and clouds, maybe some thunderstorms with that. So the fun just keeps on coming. There's a look at Mexico there. Very active in that region, and I'll see if we can animate that and see what it shows. There's Terra right there. And then we're expecting more development a little bit south of the sector that we're seeing here. But right here out in the Gulf of Mexico, you can see the frontal boundary. You can see that contrast. We're looking at infrared imagery. We're looking at the contrast between the warm ocean right here and also a warm air mass in that region, and some cold stratus showing back right in here. So that's showing up very distinctively, and I may have a visible image we can look at. But you can also see the Pineapple Express coming up from the Pacific there. And if we look at South Texas there, yep, southwesterly flow. That's pretty much in the mid-levels there, so that's going to go on top of that cold dome there and dump a lot of rain and other precip in Texas. I guess it's pretty much all rain there. But it was actually the same sort of situation that gave that 2-foot snowstorm to San Antonio back in '85. I don't know if there's anybody on here that remembers hearing about that, but pretty much the identical situation. It happened in January, though, with, of course, a stronger air mass. And that same Pineapple Express produced convective bands over South Texas and really got the snow going. Let me check on chat and make sure the stream is looking okay. I worked up a checklist to make sure the sound is going, so I think we're probably looking good tonight. I don't see any complaints there. All right, let me just go ahead and keep going here. And this is the isentropic chart showing the lift there in Texas. And let me just set this on the most important one. I guess maybe that's a good one right there. This is the 298 Kelvin isentropic chart. And what we're looking at here is winds and relative humidity up at about maybe 3,000 to 4,000 feet here, and maybe a little higher, about 6,000 right there. But you can see that the flow is out of the east, coming from that very moist air over Louisiana and the Gulf, and heading into the colder air out over West Texas. And if we go a little bit higher, go up to 300 Kelvin, and we can even do roughly 8 to 10,000 feet. We're picking up that south flow as we're getting into the prevailing westerlies close to the jet, picking up a little bit of that jet right there. And we are flowing that air from warm to cold. So that means a lot of ascent, and with that very dark green color, high relative humidities, and that means that everything is primed for clouds and rain. So this is a perfect cold season precip pattern for Texas. It doesn't, unless you want to drag out MCSs, this is about as good as it gets. Okay, SPC showing kind of a quiet pattern, just general thunderstorm risk in the Gulf of Mexico region, marginal in North Carolina there, and let's check storm reports, and pretty much nothing. The upper level chart, 250 millibars. Let me get that dialed up here. Somehow I maximize that window, and yeah, I think we're back to where we need to be. There we go, 250 millibars. And what we see here, very strong jet across the northeast U.S., 150 knots across Maine, Boston, up in that area. So if you're heading west from New York City, Boston to the west coast, there'll probably be an extra 30 to 45 minutes on that flight time there. You can see that very large trough across the Hudson Bay region and the northwesterly flow helping to produce cold conditions in the Midwest, Great Lakes in the Northeast. And we're also seeing a cutoff low starting to form out in the Arizona region. Looks like the center of it, probably right there around Bryce Canyon, Utah, and the wind plot showing that counterclockwise spin right there, upper level located right there. And let's see how that stacks down to the lower levels. 500 millibars, yeah, it does show a little bit of a tilt. So at 250, it was about right here. Now we're up at 500 millibars, which is about 18,000 feet instead of 34. And that puts the low right around the Phoenix, Gila Bend area. Go to 700 millibars, and it looks like it weakens a little bit. Low is right around the Phoenix area. And then at 850, looks like it is somewhere out over the Gulf of California. It's very common for cutoff lows during the cold season to be weaker as you get in the low levels out in this region. So a lot of times you'll see a pretty huge reflection in the upper level charts, but you get down towards the surface and there's just not a whole lot showing. But that's pretty common for cutoff lows, and those used to be a huge problem for the numerical models. The old models. Basically, when you had a cutoff low out in the southwestern U.S., that meant the forecast was probably going to be out to lunch for the next week. But the models have gotten much, much better at handling those systems. Let's look at the thickness in isobars. This is the current chart here. And we can see the thermal gradient going all the way from Alaska all the way down through the Canadian prairies and into the Great Lakes area. So you can see this high pressure in Saskatchewan. That's definitely a baroclinic high. Very strong temperature advection taking place around both sides. We have the cold air advection out in this area and the warm air advection out in that area right there. And yeah, that little station that we were looking at around Great Slave Lake, I think that was it's called Wequiddy or something like that. Let me bring up that webcam there. And yeah, this is a warm air advection pattern, and as we get towards the end, you can see a lot of those stratiform clouds starting to come in. The altocumulus layers really start building in, and that's due to that ascent with that strong southerly flow in that region. So they are getting a little bit of a Chinook out in that region. In fact, we can even put a warm front through that area all the way down to about Edmonton. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of drawing the fronts on here, or at least trying. And then we've got a strong cold front coming into the southeastern Alaska, right in that region right there. And then further back, we've got kind of an occlusion out there around Fairbanks. So yeah, we've got a very dynamic pattern there in Alaska and Yukon. And I've got one more video to show you right here around Whitehorse. So let me bring that up. Before I do that, you can see very strong southwesterly flow in that region. And this is looking west from the downtown Whitehorse area. And you can see standing lenticular altocumulus. There's very fast flow at cloud level. The winds are about 40 to 50 knots. But you can see the clouds are not going anywhere. They're just kind of sitting there. And they're pretty much anchored to the terrain. So yeah, you can sit here all afternoon and watch the clouds, and they'll just be sitting. These kinds of cloud forms are a good indicator of turbulence. So I don't know if we have any pilots on here, but if you see that kind of sky, that's a good indication to go back and talk to a briefer to see what's going on. So yeah, we've got a very potent mountain wave situation out around Alaska there, down to Yukon. And let's bring that back to the U.S. So if you look at the thickness, you can see how in a lot of areas it intersects the isobars like that, and it forms these boxes. And a good rule of thumb is that the smaller these boxes are, the stronger the cold, or the stronger the advection. So what's the smallest box? Well, the ones out here in Manitoba are kind of wide, but I see some pretty small boxes here in the UP of Michigan down to around Wisconsin right there. So we can pretty much conclude from that there's very strong cold air advection rolling into the Great Lakes area. And that's going to be just behind this cold front that's stretching from about Lake Huron to about, looks like around Milwaukee, and then back to South Dakota there. So this is the next shot of cold air coming in, and as that moves southeast during the day, tomorrow we're going to see some very gusty winds and cold weather coming into parts of the northeast. Cam again and see what that looks like tomorrow, because it's probably going to be seeing a lot of vertical development on the clouds, very likely some shallow towering cumulus, kind of an unstable condition, kind of showery is what I'm expecting. Across the rest of the U.S., we've got high pressure from the northwest U.S. into the Texas area, and this is just the remains of that old polar high that came through a few days ago. So that's in the process of modifying, and eventually that's going to settle into the low latitudes as it gradually weakens, unless it gets reinforced, of course, from the north. Heights and vorticity. This is the mid-level chart. This is up at about 18,000 feet, and we can see a very potent jet max coming down through Manitoba. So that's supporting that Alberta Clipper that's located right there. And this front that's coming through the Great Lakes area, through Milwaukee, South Dakota, that's actually also kind of a trough. And if you follow that aloft and go higher and higher into the atmosphere, into the mid-levels, you'll find that it kind of stacks towards the cold air. And indeed, yeah, we can see a little bit of troughing right there. So we've got pretty much all the support all tied together. Jet max right there, troughing, and that's all supporting that surface system. And of course, the stronger the surface system, the stronger the feedback into the upper levels, and that really kind of tied together. So we try to look at these systems not just at the surface, but in the upper levels too. And then of course down in Arizona we see that cutoff low, and we'll look at the GFS and see what that's going to be up to shortly. But down to the south, yeah, there's that jet stream coming across Texas there, and that's bringing up the moisture and helping to boost the isentropic lift. All right, yeah, let's look at that Alberta Clipper. I'm going to kind of put this on the northeast, and let's watch that roll in. This is the, what do we got here? This is the WRF, I think. Yeah, this is the WRF model. So let's see what's going to happen over the next 24 hours. So if you look out to the west right there, this is going to be about midnight. That's the front sweeping there through. Further, looks like by tomorrow morning, the front's already cleared all of the Great Lakes, rolling into Syracuse, Rochester, all the way down to Erie. Then we go through the rest of the day. We can see that front has already made it into much of New England. So that's bringing some much cooler air down, and I can see temperatures are down to freezing all the way into northern Ontario there. Okay, back to Texas. Remember, we got that north flow in the pretty much most of the state. Let's look at a couple soundings. We'll start out with Fort Worth, and maybe we'll go down south, maybe to Lake Charles or Corpus Christi. So let's bring that up there. Okay, this morning, Fort Worth showing a very prominent frontal inversion right there. Looks like that frontal inversion tops out at about 4,000 feet. And I remember we had that front come through, I think, back on Saturday, and it was a lot deeper. And I think maybe the tops of that outbreak are up here, about 15,000 feet or so. So I think what we have with that lower frontal inversion, that's probably a bit of a reinforcing shot. We can see the stronger north winds coming into that area. And let me go down to Lake Charles. Cold air mass a little bit shallower there. Air mass is only topping out at about 2,000 feet in that area. And let's go down to Corpus Christi. And let's see here. Yeah, the tops of that cold air mass up at about 3,000 to 4,000 feet. So it's fairly shallow. Now, I do know the tops, like I said, over the weekend, they were a lot deeper. And I'm kind of sitting here trying to remember exactly how things unfolded over the weekend, and I'm not sure. Let me go back. Instead of sitting here guessing, let me just dial this back to the 13th. And just take a quick peek at the forward sounding. Okay, the front is rolling through that area on the 13th, and let's bring that up 24 hours. Actually, I guess it did not come through as deep as I had. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it came through here pretty shallow, actually. So, yeah, I guess pretty much all the cold air is what's below 5,000 feet. I think it was a lot deeper when it was coming through the Dodge City area, because we were looking at that, I think, back on the Sunday night broadcast. So I guess we're getting not the full brunt of the air mass that the high plains is getting. And basically, as you go southeast, you get into the shallower air mass. Okay, so that makes sense. All right, take a look at a couple more soundings. I guess we'll go out to Atlanta. I believe they're going to be, I don't know, let's check the weather pattern, see what's going on there. Yeah, the front came through that area. Looks like it's still crossing Georgia, and I'm going to put that frontal boundary kind of like that right there. So we should see probably a little bit of a shallow layer of cool air, or maybe not much at all. And let's see here. Yeah, winds are pretty much out of the south this morning, so the front hadn't quite come through when they launched that sounding. But if we go a little bit further to the north, up to Nashville, we should get deeper into that cold air. Nope, still out of that set on yesterday's. So let me go ahead and bring that all the way up to 17Z. Maybe we got the new soundings. Okay, new soundings. Okay, yeah, 17Z. Atlanta's got very shallow north flow. Not much of a reflection at the surface in terms of temperature. And yeah, there's a frontal inversion right there, topping out at about 4,000 feet. Very light north winds. And then we'll just take that one step up into Illinois. And now we pick up some strong westerly winds in that area. Looks like the frontal inversion is about right there. All right, so that's our rundown of the soundings, and we'll just take a look at the satellite data. There's our system there in Texas. We can see all the moisture flowing up over the top of that cold dome. And up to the north, the Alberta Clipper coming in to the Great Lakes area. So not much to talk about region by region. I think a couple of fires have sprouted out around the Bend, Oregon area, but other than that, pretty quiet. Going down to the northwestern or the southwestern U.S., you can see the cutoff low spinning out around out there in Arizona, so that's producing some showers in the higher terrain of the state there. For the North Plains, kind of a dry northerly flow through that region. And then as you go up into Ontario, you get more into the instability as you get closer to that surface system. Not much to say about the low cloud around the fringes, like especially right here on the Gulf Coast. This is all pure stratus and stratocumulus. And then right in here you can see the convective elements. And there's some good ones right there from about, looks like around Stephenville, maybe down to Junction, and maybe down to Sanderson there. Well, for the northeast U.S., we were looking at that footage from Ottawa on the opening clip, and you can see some mountain waves. I'm not sure I would call these really mountain waves, but it is. These are waves in the atmosphere. So there's a little bit of, I guess, if you want to call it, very strong flow moving through that area. We saw the 150 knot winds on the upper level chart, and I would expect probably a bit of turbulence in that area. And some of these are going to be lenticular clouds, especially along the southern fringes where there's a little bit of instability. Kind of a quiet day across much of the region, and you can see the front right there from Atlanta all the way down to Birmingham and down to the New Orleans area. So making very slow progress there. And one little bonus stop, the tropics. So we're going down into the Caribbean, and you can see, looks like some convective elements out there in the ocean, especially as you go south off the coast of Belize. And if we run that forward a little bit, see these showers coming in, and they've got kind of a very cellular look. In fact, let me see if I can find an example. Yeah, you see right in here, these form kind of like cells. In the middle of it, there's subsidence. There's like a lot of downward motion going on. And along the edges, there's some upward motion. So we can actually see what the weather was like. Let's go to this station right here. And I forgot the name, but I may be able to bring that up. Let me pull it up. I guess while you watch that, this is looking out to the east, and you can see those clouds moving in from the Gulf. And yeah, I don't have the station name, but it's about 50 miles south of Cancun. But if you look off to the left, out on the horizon, you'll see a convective a tower go up. It's getting kind of towards the end of the day, so it's not really going to do much, but it's already producing some downdraft air. And along the periphery, that huge mass of shallow cumulus there, you can see that rolling in, pretty spectacular. And this is kind of what happens along there. They get, there's kind of a cycle every 1 or 2 hours. You'll get this kind of thing going on, a lot of clouds rolling in, and then you'll have fair weather like this, and it'll stay like that for another hour, and you'll have another line moving in. So that's typically what it's like in the trade wind belt when things are a little bit unstable. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that there. Let me, I think we're getting about to the end of the analysis products, so I'll take a quick look at chat. So let me drag my window over here. Okay, JT, unable to make it to the webcast. That's fine. We all have commitments. David Lumbert, Maumelle, Arkansas, 49/44. Erica Baker in Kansas, 62/37. We got Sue M here. Excuse me. Fun with Tech is here, and Justin Pulliam, Willie Greenway in Georgia. Michael O, and looking forward to winter there. Ryan Toomey is with us. Aerial Perspective 63 in California. Alexei Pinkson Walsh, 48, and rainy in Texarkana. Ryan Toomey's recommending the Zodiac inflatable boat. Yeah, we could use one of those here. Sam Hooker, 59/43 there in Washington. And just scrolling very quickly through this before. So I'm noticing the microphone's voice pitch is low. Yeah, we had that problem last week, but I reset the panel. I'll just do that one more time. Let me go over to my board here. Okay, so things should be reset there. I'm not too sure there was an audio problem there, but okay. All right, well, I guess we got more things to research, so I'll investigate that audio problem, and hopefully we will squash that. I don't know why that's happening. Carl Berghoff, 47 degrees there, gusty west-northwest winds. Fred Reamer liking those Canadian webcams. Scott Inderlead, Dodge City has a big temperature drop. I'll see if I can pull that up real quick. Well, yeah, there's this one layer here on the evening sounding. That's a dry layer, just below 10,000 feet. Maybe the air mass is not very well mixed at that level. If the air mass is pretty stratified, that kind of thing can happen there. Let me go back to this morning sounding. Let me just check and make sure that wasn't something from an earlier skew-t. Yeah, on this morning sounding, just see kind of a very typical radiation inversion right there. Okay, let's see here. Carl Berghoff. Haven't had a Indian summer. Santa Ana winds the last few days. Ron Chalfant. Yeah, we had that very deep cold air mass going south into Arizona and Southern California. And when we have those air masses topping out over 10 to 15,000 feet, they will tend to make it into Southern California and give that Santa Ana wind. Well, I'm glad the reset cleared up the audio problems. I don't know what's going on there, because I did reset the board at 658. So maybe something else is causing issues. All right. Anyway, let's go into the forecast and see what's going on. I think what I need to do is pick up my headphones and start listening to myself. I don't like doing that because it's kind of distracting, but I think it may be necessary. Anyway, here's a quick look at the NAM, and this will kind of show you what's going on in Texas. We've got the north flow, as we mentioned, cold winds coming southward. But if you go up to 850 millibars up at 5,000 feet, you can see the flow turns more easterly. And this is some of that isentropic lift right there. It's not, yeah, there is a little bit of upslope going on there, but also there's a cold air mass that's kind of entrenched over West Texas. So there at 850 has to ascend. And then we go up to 700 millibars and we pick up the southerly flow there. Yeah, there we go, right there. And the cold air, pretty much right there. And we've got moist southerly winds producing that ascent over that cold dome there. So yeah, we definitely need northwesterly winds from the surface up to about 700 millibars to really clear out the moisture, but we don't have that today. All right, let's look at the week ahead. Looking at the GFS. There comes our next system coming in from the west there. So that's going to have a big impact tomorrow in the Great Lakes. And just hang on just a second. I'm going to have to... Yeah, I've got old data coming in. Hang on a second. This may impact the stream just a tiny bit, but it should come back here shortly if that does happen. Anyway, yeah, I'm loading the latest GFS data, and I'm just going to go ahead and launch into that. There it is. Okay, that's the next trough coming in from the west. I thought that looked kind of weird. And there's that energy coming into the northeast U.S. tomorrow. And then let's go into Thursday and see what's happening. Looks like things kind of quiet down a little bit. Looks like that cutoff low kind of opens up into the central plains. However, up to the north, here comes our next system. Looks like a kind of a double shot coming in from the Northwest Territories. And of course, that'll affect mostly the Great Lakes and northeast U.S. So that'll keep them busy. Looks kind of quiet for the rest of the country, maybe just kind of a reinforcing shot of cold air. And then the next change after that looks like it may be this hurricane. The remnants coming across the Rockies there, and that'll pump a lot of moisture there into Texas. Looks like GFS is going for maybe next weekend. Not this weekend, but the next one. So there's that big mess coming into Texas. And then looks like the flow gets a lot more zonal. This is kind of a big change. So this is the end of next week, and you can see that zonal flow that'll bring an increase in the Pacific systems coming in. So there's a couple of waves. There's actually a bunch of them. So those will affect mostly the northern U.S., but eventually one of these will work down into the central U.S., and it looks like that's starting there around the 28th. And then the flow turns more northwesterly. That'll probably bring some more cold air in right around the day before Halloween. And that pretty much gets to the end of the run there. So it does look like it's going to continue kind of cool. And depending on the timing of those outbreaks as they come south, that with the southwesterly flow is likely to produce more rain in the south U.S. Okay, well, that's about all I got for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed the webcast. One last check on the chat there. All right, very good. I appreciate you all joining, and we'll see you on, what is it? Is today Thursday? No, today is Tuesday. Okay, yeah, we'll see you on Thursday at the same time. So take care and have a good evening. Bye-bye.